Thank you all for joining us this evening for an Empower Hour. We're very excited about this panel of speakers tonight. There's just a little bit of initial business that we need to take care of. First, just wanted to point everybody to the Empower Our Future website, where we have recordings of all of our past Empower Hours, including one by Dr. Ron Sinton, who spoke about how using clean electricity can actually enable more of it. It's about optimizing your power usage, especially in light of the new time of use rates. So again, all of the Empower Hours that we've ever done have been recorded and are on our website. We started doing this in January of 2021. And they're at empowerourfuture.org/events. We always take a moment and do a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge with respect as non-native people that the land on which we stand, live, and learn is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. Let us seek to understand what it means to be in right relationship today with the traditional stewards of this land and with this land itself and with all the creatures that inhabit it. And moving right along, I am pleased to introduce our first speaker, Lauren Swain of the Physicians for Social Responsibility. She will tell you a little bit more about her background and set the scene for tonight's panel.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Lauren Swain. I'm Program Director for Physicians for Social Responsibility of Colorado. And I'm going to put up our first slide here. So I'm sharing. So the topic of my part of this presentation is shaping the Xcel gas infrastructure plan for health, safety, climate, and consumers. And I work for Physicians for Social Responsibility of Colorado, the chapter of PSR National. We mobilize health professionals and allies to address the gravest environmental threats to human health and survival. What is the gas infrastructure plan? The Xcel gas infrastructure plan is a proceeding at the Public Utilities Commission. The PUC is charged with implementation of the Clean Heat Statute that says gas utilities must cut GHG emissions by 22% compared with 2015 levels by 2030. And the three major areas that are addressed by this plan are system safety and integrity, that is repairing and replacing current pipelines. Capacity expansion, that means if some areas need more capacity, more gas, or more power for buildings, there are projects that have to be done to meet those needs, whether it's something new or an increased demand from a certain area. And new business, that's new building development, largely home development, but other building development as well. And so these are the three major areas that the gas infrastructure plan is intended to address. So how does Xcel's gas infrastructure plan, their proposal, impact your health and safety and finances? We'll start with the finances. Xcel is asking the Public Utilities Commission for approval to charge consumers millions more for gas pipeline investment. Their profit model is based on investing more consumer dollars in more pipelines, and that is what they're used to. And they have a guaranteed return on that, and they're very comfortable with that. And so it's not a surprise that to meet demand in these three areas, they are mostly defaulting to more gas pipelines. How does this affect your safety? Wherever those gas pipeline projects take place, extending gas pipelines, probably repairing or increasing that capacity. Wherever pipelines are or whether they're being worked on, it increases the risk of leaks, fires, and explosions for those impacted communities. Your safety's impacted. Health, and that is a long-term risk, not just a short-term risk while the projects are being done. Health, gas combustion, pollutes indoor and outdoor air, harming the heart, lungs, and other organs, especially for infants, children, and the elderly. The more we rely on gas, the more new people, new customers that are using gas, the more exposure there is to these pollutants. And the climate, of course, is at risk because the more gas is being used means that methane and carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases from gas leaks will fuel the climate crisis, causing heat waves, fires, droughts, and flooding, and other unnatural disasters that threaten our health and safety and finances. So how can the Public Utilities Commission step in to protect your health and safety and finances and the climate in this proceeding? The Public Utilities Commission can require Xcel to implement a gas infrastructure plan that rejects billing consumers for unnecessary investment in current and future gas pipelines. The PUC can require Xcel to promote non-pipeline alternatives. That means heat pumps, thermal energy networks, or ground source heat pumps that will accelerate Colorado's transition to clean heat solutions, which is required by statute. And the PUC can help local governments and developers implement these non-pipeline alternatives with thermal energy networks that lower energy costs for residents and protect our health and safety and the climate. They are in a position to do that. So diving into health, because that's the focus of our work at Physicians for Social Responsibility, I just wanted to bring your attention to a new report from November of last year, Fueling Sickness, the Hidden Health Costs of Fossil Fuel Pollution, and also our update on the risks and harms of gas-fired residential appliances. And of course, gas stoves are not ventilated, are not regulated the way that furnaces are. Furnaces, when they emit pollutants, those pollutants go out into the immediate neighborhood and they go into our atmosphere, and that is not good. However, there is a system and required to, even inspections that keep those emissions out of your home. That's not true for gas-fired appliances. So a lot of the worst risks and harms come from gas stoves being used in the home, but all gas appliances have health and safety risks. And hazardous air pollutants emitted by gas production, transport, and end use include nitrogen dioxide, a respiratory irritant that also can impact infant health. Carbon monoxide. If you don't have gas in your home, you basically do not need a carbon monoxide detector, and we all know that carbon monoxide can kill you in severe and put you at severe risk. So nobody wants to be in a home with carbon monoxide if you can avoid it. PM 2.5, particulate matter that aggravates asthma and heart conditions and affects many bodily systems, and volatile organic compounds that include benzene and formaldehyde that are carcinogenic. The indoor and outdoor air pollutant emissions from gas damage our health and are harmful to the climate. So it also affects our ozone levels. We have a high, we're out of compliance with federal ozone standards here. So these emissions also contribute to that. It disproportionately impacts Black, Indigenous, and Latino communities and low-income communities that are least able to navigate the costs. And the cost of health impacts of gas can be assessed based on lost days of work and school, lost caregiving for families, lost services to businesses, increased insurance and taxpayer costs, among others. Reliance on gas aggravates the climate crisis and public health. Buildings are responsible for about 29%, roughly a third of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. The gas that utilities pipe into our homes is a fossil fuel which is methane gas, 86 times more damaging to the climate than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period. And most gas is produced using fracking, a method that releases hazardous air and water pollutants and often leads to chemical spills, fires, and explosions. Oil and gas production is also responsible for about 40% of the Front Range ozone pollution problem. and also releases carcinogenic benzene and other toxic air pollutants. We don't need to burn gas in our homes, and we're going to learn more about why that's the case, the law behind the gas infrastructure plan, and the equity impacts from our other presenters here. So I'll stop here and then I'll pick up at the end. Thank you very much for being here and being in a position to learn. And I hope you'll share with everybody you know, because there will be opportunities to raise our voices and make a difference in this proceeding.
Okay, I think I'm up next. I'm Tracy Burnett, former Colorado State Representative and prime sponsor of the statute that established the requirements for clean heat plants. I'm going to talk about three different things. I'm going to talk about the laws that require clean heat plans. I'm going to talk a little bit about a recent audit by the state of the Public Utilities Commission on pipeline safety, and also talk about the improvements I think that Xcel can do to their gas infrastructure plan. I'm going to call it the GIP. Okay, there's two primary laws that affect the GIP. The first one is my main bill, the Clean Heat Plans. And what this does is it sets statewide clean heat targets that require all gas utilities, both municipal and investor-owned utilities, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in buildings by developing clean heat plans. And it requires that these clean heat targets say that we reduce greenhouse gas emission in buildings by 22% by 2030 and also 100% by 2050. Another one of my laws, gas demand side management, greatly increased the gas utility rebates for efficient gas appliances and weatherization and heat pumps. It really helps transition to clean heat. But there's a number of other laws that support these clean heat plans. First of all, building performance standards. That requires large buildings to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in existing buildings by 20% by 2030 versus a 2021 baseline. Another one, beneficial electrification plans. This means that electric utilities must foster electrifying buildings. There are four other laws that support this transition to clean heat. The Building Energy Codes bill, that's another one of my bills. That's a really big one. It requires all Colorado communities to adopt new building energy codes that are not only heat pump ready, and more efficient buildings, tighter building envelopes, but it also fosters heat pump adoption. I mean, this is a really big deal. For the very first time in statute in the US, it levels the playing field between highly efficient clean heat pumps versus much less efficient gas furnaces. And what this is, according to Rocky Mountain Institute, over the next 25 years, this law alone will remove 3.9 million gas cars from the road for a single year. That's how big this bill is. Some other supporting bills, modernizing the Public Utilities Commission. What this does is it tips the scale in favor of clean heat by requiring the PUC to include the social cost of carbon and equity in their decisions. And this really helps people who are low income, or people who are, tend to be left behind. So this was a really important bill. Two other ones that were passed, laws that were passed in 2024. One of them said lower electric rates for heat pumps, and also neighborhood scale non-gas pilot projects. In other words, clean heat networks. The bottom line of all these bills, it's clear the legislature said they're giving clear direction to gas utilities to transition to clean heat, and a lot of support to make sure that these gas utilities have the support they need to be successful in doing that. So what is a gas infrastructure plan? Well, the GIP identifies proposed plans for installing new gas lines, plus repairs and maintenance. And how is it related to these laws? Well, I just talked about the clean heat targets, the statewide clean heat targets. And from there, the utilities by law must create clean heat plans that say how they're going to meet those clean heat targets. The next step is the gas infrastructure plans should support those clean heat plans and the clean heat targets. But here's the important thing I've learned since I've been out of office. Just because a law is passed doesn't mean it will be implemented according to the law or in the way the law intended. That's why it's so important for people to show up at these PUC hearings and make their voices heard. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about a recent safety audit of the Public Utilities Commission and their oversight over gas infrastructure safety. This is dealing with gas pipelines between 2017 and 2022. There were a lot of problems. It's jaw-dropping. First of all, they said that the inspections that the PUC were doing were incomplete. There were missing inspections. They didn't meet federal requirements. The enforcement of these of safety, 94% of over 5,600 violations were not enforced. In terms of penalties, there were just a few penalties assessed, just a handful of them, but they didn't collect on them. We're talking $4.8 million of assessed penalties. They only collected $5,000. There was insufficient accident and complaint reporting. They didn't follow up on accidents or complaints. There was lack of oversight and training. In fact, some former utility employees, when they joined the PUC, they turned around and they were then inspecting their former employees' pipelines. There are a number of management changes at the PUC. Both the PUC director and manager changed. There's now a new one that started in, I believe, 2023. But one other thing on this whole report, just 9 non-compliance issues that they saw resulted in 9 safety accidents, 5 of which were Xcel accidents. But let me tell you the impact of those 9 accidents. There were 2 fatalities, dozens of injuries, including hospitalizations, several destroyed homes, over $1 million of damages, 6,400 customers lost power, some for up to 4 days. There were evacuations, the highway was closed. The bottom line, gas is dangerous. Gas is dangerous. So the new PUC director said these issues have all been resolved. We need, let's wait and see. Okay, finally, I want to talk about how Xcel's gas infrastructure plan can be improved. First of all, Xcel needs to do a better job of leading with education. And I just ask, how many people know what a heat pump is? They need to explain that. They need to explain better the benefits of heat pumps and how they're clean, they're more efficient. Lauren talked about indoor and outdoor air quality. Well, my son nearly died of an asthma attack. And I'm just going to say one thing. I believe in the next 5 to 10 years, I project that people will think of burning fossil fuels in their homes the way they now think of having lead paint in their homes. They will not want them. So education is going to drive how to transition this. If people are demanding heat pumps, then developers and HVAC companies will install them. So lead with education. Another thing, Xcel needs to accelerate the transition to clean heat in existing buildings. I did a really quick market analysis of single-family homes. And by 2032, I expect about 140,000 new single-family homes that will be built in Colorado. That there are opportunities to have heat pumps instead of gas furnaces. However, by 2032, there'll be over 800,000 gas furnaces that will need replacing. That's 85% of the total market. But the key is on those existing buildings, there's only 1 or 2 opportunities between now and 2050 for those gas furnaces to be replaced with heat pumps, because furnaces last about 10 or 15 years. But the transition takes planning. You can't swap out a heat pump if a gas furnace fails in the middle of the winter. You're just not going to do it. Need some planning. But things like replacing your aging air conditioner with a heat pump does make sense, and you plan it out. So 3 other things that Xcel can do. They can stop expanding the problem. They're talking about all sorts of new gas customers and new lines and all that. They should make heat pumps the default option. If a customer wants to put in something with gas, Xcel should first explain what heat pumps are and go through all the benefits before they even talk about gas and gas rebates and all that stuff. So this is to prevent stranded gas infrastructure assets, because we also worry about the people who are least can afford transitioning to clean heat. They're going to be paying for these stranded assets forever. Another thing, Xcel's forecast in their GIP does not even include Colorado's new building energy codes in this forecast. What the heck? This is a huge impact on the future forecast. It's got to be included in the forecast. And then finally, they need to improve their communication and outreach. And by that, I mean, take a look at their website and assume that you don't know anything about heat pumps. There's very few explanation of what they are, the benefits. In the heating solutions section of the website, they don't even mention heat pumps. There's no case studies saying, that this is how Joe Schmo resident, transferred, got his heat pump. None of that's in there. And also, finally, they can add more partnerships with like the Green Building Guild and architects and Go Electric Colorado and many other things. So that's my thing. We'll pass it on to the next presenter. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Patricia Garcia Nelson. I am the Colorado Fossil Fuels Just Transition Advocate for GreenLatinos. My work revolves mostly around air quality issues, oil and gas, and that means oil and gas from the upstream, so the extraction, the refining, the production of their quote-unquote products, and now I'm working on things down to the end user. Today I'm going to share a very high-level analysis of GreenLatinos' equity analysis of their gas infrastructure plan, and why we feel like this plan raises serious concerns for frontline and disproportionately impacted communities across Colorado. So for this analysis, all we did was we reviewed the full list of gas infrastructure plan projects that Xcel has proposed, and we compared that to CDPHE's maps and data on disproportionately impacted communities. And so this allowed us to ask a very basic but crucial question: who is actually bearing the burden of these so-called investments? If you take a look here on the slide, you'll see a pretty quick summary of the total projects and their proximity or their locations in DICs. And so you'll see that specifically Adams County, 100% of their county or 100% of the projects in their county are going to also be located in disproportionately impacted communities. This QR code and then this short link here, I can put that in the chat after. That is a link to our analysis, so you all can take a look at the full report that we put together. And so, like I said, the entire finding is really striking. Of the total 63 projects that Xcel has proposed, 44 of those are in DIC. So about 70% of all the projects that are being proposed are going to be in disproportionately impacted communities. And one of the things that, we always talk about is that this is not accidental. It is going to reflect systematic planning choices, and that's not just around gas infrastructure. one of the things that we bring up a lot in our work is going to be around energy siting and the future of energy siting. Because one of the things that we've realized at Green Latinos is that a lot of these projects don't start in these regulating agencies. They're going to start at a planning commission, or they're going to start in somewhere in the land of land use. And so what we've wanted to build into a lot of our policy work lately is equity around energy siting, because if you think about it, a lot of the new sites, or excuse me, a lot of the new technologies are going to be sited in areas that are most likely already zoned as industrial or some kind of special use. So it's really important that when we talk about even the new energy coming through, we really think about who's going to be the most impacted, especially when we talk about where these new energy sources are going to go. What we also found, and I feel like a lot of people are going to bring this up, is that they're disguising expansion as reliability. So a lot of the projects that were proposed were called some kind of maintenance or some kind of improvement. But what we really see is that they are expanding the life of these assets. So one of the things that I don't believe anyone has mentioned when we talk about the pipelines, that they last 30 to 70 years. And we're not just talking about the infrastructure itself, we also have to think about the cost. So this is an asset for the utility companies. And one of the things that they are allowed to do is that they are able to charge the ratepayers the costs of these assets. So essentially, they're putting all of these pipelines in, and we're the ones that end up paying for them. I say we because I'm also an Xcel ratepayer. And then what we're when we're looking at the future of energy in the United States, we do see that there has been a decline in gas demand, and I feel like we're only going to start seeing more of that. And then when we think about the reliability and the affordability of renewable sources, I feel like it's coming in hot. I like to be an optimist because I feel like that's one of the things that gets me through the day when we do this really hard work. So why do all these things matter when we talk about energy siting and all of these things that Xcel has proposed? So what we have also found is that there are $2.8 billion in gas investments. And at the same time, we're still seeing methane leaks that are going to worsen the climate and ozone pollution and cause so many problems for the earth and the people that are around them. And what we also see is that these gas rates are projected to increase. And so at the end of the day, what we see is that the most burdens end up falling on the communities that are the most disproportionately impacted. Like I spoke earlier, when we talk about energy siting, when we think about all of the most polluted areas, those are our energy sources at the moment. And it's very unfortunate, but I feel like it's very, very important to talk about energy siting. I was going to talk a little bit about the PUC pipeline safety audit, but Tracy did an awesome job reviewing it. So I won't go over any of that. When we talk about what real solutions look like for our communities. Again, a lot of the things people have been talking about: electrification of heat pumps, thermal energy networks, weatherization and efficiency, and demand side management. I also wanted to include mention of the Renewable Energy Park report for Pueblo. My colleague Jaime Valdez, I think a lot of you know him, or Jamie Valdez. He worked with an organization to put this report together. And so what we are able to do with that report is we're able to show legislators and regulators that it is possible. We have a plan to do it. What this report shows is that an energy park model would combine renewable energy storage and clean industrial use. And that ends up generating an estimated $40 million a year for property revenue for Pueblo. And that's extremely important also when we talk about, how we're going to replace things and what we're going to replace it with. For some of you that don't know, the energy that's produced by the coal plants in Pueblo does not stay in that community. And so again, another case where we see communities that are being burdened, but they're not reaping the benefits. And so I can definitely include a link to that report in our follow-up. And I just want to encourage everybody to take a look at that because I know a lot of the times we're asking for change. And this is a great example of what we can look forward to. Some priorities for Green Latinos. We are not a formal party to the rulemaking at the PUC, or excuse me, the proceedings at the PUC, but we are encouraging our members and we are working on a campaign sharing our equity analysis. And so we're really hoping that a lot of what we share today will be part of y'all's comments when you are writing them to the PUC. If y'all need any help whatsoever, please reach out. I feel like I can speak for all of us. If you need help submitting your comments or putting them together, we are absolutely 100% here to help. But just to quickly go over our priorities, we must stop expanding ratepayer-funded gas infrastructure. We are actively participating at the PUC and different proceedings, including the rate-paying cases. We're working on the PUC sunset, so we're working to implement equity policies throughout the PUC and other agencies. Like everyone else, we are really hoping for there to be non-pipeline alternatives for all of the projects. And we want there to especially be no new infrastructure projects, but only non-pipeline projects in disproportionately impacted communities. And of course, we want there to be an alignment of the approval for these projects so that we're able to meet our clean heat targets. I can say that I've been working on this issue for quite a long time, and I know a lot of people have been working on this for quite a long time. So I'm really glad to share this information with y'all, and I will pass it on to Chuck, I believe.
All righty. Thanks very much. So I guess Tracy mentioned that PSCo should explain to people what heat pumps are. And so that's kind of what I've been asked to do. So I'll be talking about this transition to heat pumps. Before I do that, I just want to remind people why we're doing all this energy transition stuff. You know, we're living through a period of American government right now where climate change is being denied. And, if you deny something, it doesn't go away, it just gets worse. And if you look at the history of when Americans learned about climate change, you can go back to the Johnson administration. Scientists were warning the Johnson administration about it, but a lot of people remember, in particular, James Hansen's testimony in 1988. So basically, he was a NASA scientist, head of the Goddard Institute for Space Studies. He's still with us, still very active. But he gave seminal testimony to the U.S. Senate back in 1988, warning that climate change is here now in 1988, and it's bad, and we need to do something about it. And I just want to remind people that was 37 years ago. And yet, virtually every year, we set a new record for global carbon emissions. So I want to explain why this is important. You know, what climate skeptics will tell you is, well, look, if you look at the history of the Earth, it's gotten warmer, it's gotten colder. Climate change is natural. Yeah, it's natural, but what we're seeing right now is very unnatural, and when it's happening is very significant. So we, Homo sapiens, have been around for about 300,000 years, but it's only in the last 10,000 years that civilization developed. So what happened 10,000 years ago is it warmed up, ice melted, sea level rose, temperature came up, and we entered this sort of Goldilocks period of very, very stable, temperature during what's called the Holocene. And what we've done since we started burning fossil fuels is driven ourselves dramatically out of this particular climate that we and every life on Earth is adapted to. And if I go here to the next slide, you can see here are carbon dioxide levels. They vary over 100,000 year cycles, but that's irrelevant to mankind. And what you see is, if looking back at the last 2,000 years, constant carbon dioxide levels until when we started burning oil, coal, and natural gas. A dramatic rise in the CO2 level and a dramatic rise in the global average temperature of the air and also of the oceans. And in fact, if we hadn't done this, the Earth would be, by changes in the orbital parameters of the Earth, we'd actually be in a very slow cooling period right now, very gradual. Instead, we're in a very dramatic heating period. And so what that means is it's totally changed weather patterns. Not only have we raised the temperature roughly about 2 degrees Fahrenheit, the average temperature, but it has gone up very non-uniformly over the surface of the Earth. And it's those variations in temperature over the surface that drive weather patterns. And so we're seeing very unusual things happen. Now, this is what NOAA has recorded going back to 1980, billion-dollar disaster events. And the size of these bars and the colors indicate how many of these events occur and what type they are in the United States. Now, basically, NOAA has been banned from continuing to add data to this. So this is the last report that was allowed. And you can see this gradual rise. Now, that has to do with the amount of money spent, but there have been studies around the world on extreme weather events irrelevant or not related at all to the actual cost of cleanup. And what they found was, in hundreds of studies of these weather events around the globe, in about 70% of them, climate change either made it more likely or made it more severe. And here in Colorado, we had the most destructive wildfire in Colorado history, the Marshall Fire. When did it occur? It occurred in the wintertime 4 years ago. Record wildfires aren't supposed to happen in the winter, but that's what's happening now. 1,000 homes destroyed, 1,000 pets lost, 2 human lives lost. And this was very, very clearly, you can find papers on this, very clearly related to climate change. So the good news is, in spite of all this problem with climate change that we have to address, we now have solutions that 10 or 15 years ago we really didn't have. What's happened is the cost of wind power, solar power, and batteries have dropped dramatically in the last 15 years. And so if you look at the US electric grid and you look at what's growing and what isn't, the one thing that's growing on the electric grid, renewables. And if you break that down, this is the growth of solar, the yellow curve. This is the growth of wind. Everything else is either level, basically, or declining. And of course, battery storage is going up too, which helps enable that solar and wind. So that's in the US. This is what's happening in the world globally. If you look at the total amount of electricity generated in gigawatts, billions of watts around the world, total for the planet, okay? This is what's happening. Solar is now number one. And here's wind, here's solar. And what I want to point out is not just where they are, but the slopes of those curves. Both, in particular, both wind and solar are increasing, especially solar. This is good news. These are the lowest cost technologies for electricity, and they're growing rapidly, despite the fact that the current administration in the US is doing everything to move us back to coal, natural gas, etc. All right, so the good news is we have cheap solar and wind electricity, cheap batteries. They're growing like crazy, but we need to do more than just decarbonize the electric grid. And I should point out that Xcel is doing a very good job of that in Colorado. But to use that electricity, we need to get fossil fuels out of the end-use sectors. So in transportation, we need to transition from gasoline vehicles to battery electric vehicles. And in buildings, from gas furnaces to heat pumps. And this latter issue is what we're really all about here. All right, so what the heck is a heat pump? A heat pump does not produce heat, it moves heat. Now, all of you know that heat naturally moves from a high temperature to a low temperature. And in a power plant, in generating power, you take advantage of that movement of heat from high temperature to low temperature. A heat pump does the opposite. It pumps heat up from a low temperature back up to a high temperature. So it moves heat from a place with low temperature to a place with high temperature. So it cools the lower temperature place and it heats the higher temperature place. Now, everybody experiences heat pumps every day, whether you know it or not. A window air conditioner, a refrigerator essentially pumps heat out of your refrigerator and dumps it into your kitchen. A car air conditioner, the wall unit that you'll see in a hotel room. Now, typically when we say heat pump, we talk about a device like an air conditioner that can run in both directions. And that's done by allowing a reversing valve to change the direction of the flow of the refrigerant fluid. But I wanted to show you an example of how a heat pump works when it's heating a building. And this is the type of heat pump I have in my house, and a lot of people now have in their homes. This is an air source heat pump, an air-to-air heat pump. And so what it does is it takes heat out of in the wintertime, out of the cold outside air. It's cold, but it's still got heat in it. And it dumps it into the house. So it's moving heat from a low temperature place to a higher temperature place. It's doing that pumping. Now, what happens is it takes work to do that. And that's a compressor. That's the refrigerant compressor, and that's powered with electricity. So if we take an example of what's happening typically, on a typical day, it might be working like this. Your electricity is putting a kilowatt hour of electricity into the compressor to move this fluid around this loop. And what it'll do is it'll pull about 2 kilowatt hours of heat out of the cold outside air. And that 2 kilowatt hours of heat adds to the heat of the compressor and dumps 3 kilowatt hours of heat into the house. So we say that has a coefficient of performance of 3. The ratio of the heat that you get inside your house to how much electric energy you had to put in to make this happen is 3-to-1. Now, that's for any given time. It varies. What happens is it depends on this temperature difference between the inside air and the outside air. The bigger that difference, the more work the heat pump has to do to pump it up. All right. The lower the temperature difference, the more efficient it is. So throughout the winter, it varies a lot. But in Denver, if you get a good cold climate heat pump, which we now have available, and we didn't have these not many years ago, basically the average coefficient of performance in the heating season will be about 2.4 in Denver. That means that for every kilowatt hour of electricity you buy from the utility, you'll get 2.5 kilowatt hours of heat taken from the outside air and dumped into your house. Now, it's better if you can use the ground as a source of heat, because in the wintertime, the ground is warmer than the outside air. And there you can get a coefficient of performance of 4-to-1, roughly, averaged over the season. Now, how cost effective is this? What does it do to your electric bill? Well, roughly, if the ratio of your electricity cost to gas cost is less than 2.4-to-1 for an air source heat pump, it'll be cheaper to use the heat pump. And for a ground source, you can have an electricity to cost ratio as high as 4-to-1, and it'll still make sense. And I want to point out, none of this accounts for all the damage that you're avoiding by using a heat pump instead of dumping carbon dioxide into the air by burning methane gas in a furnace. So if you look at the EPA under the Biden administration social cost of carbon, which was $190 a ton, and I want to point out, that was based on very, very good science. That was not a politically determined number. It's a scientifically based number. But if you really apply that cost to gas, it doubles the cost of natural gas and easily makes the heat pump way more effective in terms of overall economics. Now, in terms of putting a heat pump in your house and replacing a gas furnace, we do want to make sure that you're not going to see an increase in heating bills, because electricity is still quite a bit more expensive than gas in Colorado. Gas is unfortunately very cheap. But essentially, with these new time of use rates during the week, 20 hours a day out of 24, the electricity cost is only 7 cents a kilowatt hour. So basically, if you're if you preheat your house a little bit before the hours from 5 to 9 p.m. when the rate goes up to 18 cents a kilowatt hour, you can sort of coast through the very, very high period here when it's from 5 to 9 when it's really expensive, and make use of this really low cost the other 20 hours of the day. And then I also want to point out, in general, it's a good idea if you replace a gas furnace with a heat pump, it's cost effective then to make some energy efficiency improvements, maybe put some more insulation in your attic, maybe consider better windows, that kind of thing. And that will help with the utility bill as well. All right, so the right solution here in terms of climate change, electrify or decarbonize our grids, and then rapidly electrify buildings and transportation. And when you compare a gas furnace to heat pumps, the gas furnace might be somewhere between 80 and 90% efficient. A cold climate heat pump, 240%. A geothermal heat pump or ground coupled heat pump, about 400%. You know, that's that COP of 4, that's that COP of 2.4. So this is my home. I electrified it about 3 years ago. This is the outdoor unit for the heat pump. This is the indoor unit. It's connected to an air handler. I do have a backup electric resistance heater, but as I will point out in a minute, I haven't used it at all. I have a heat pump water heater and also an induction stove in this all-electric building. So heat pumps outsold gas furnaces by the biggest margin ever in 2024 in the U.S. So that's the good news. We are now seeing more heat pumps go in than gas furnaces. And I want to finish up by mentioning ground coupled, also called geothermal heat pumps. So this is an example of a project in Massachusetts that was really a groundbreaking, I guess figuratively and literally, project. And you can see here, in this case, boreholes are drilled, and then you use the heat both as a source, the ground as a source of heat in the wintertime for heating, and as a sink to dump heat out of your house into the ground during the summer. And you can see this is an example of how it's done. These boreholes might be 300 feet or so deep. So it's expensive to retrofit just an existing home by bringing out a big drill rig and drilling holes in the ground. This makes more sense in a new housing development. So studies have shown that when you do this in a new home development, it's low cost because it avoids the whole natural gas infrastructure. Remember how I think the previous speaker mentioned that, when you put that piping in, it's there for 70, 80 years or so. It's more efficient than a gas furnace by far, and it's even more efficient than an air source heat pump. And it lowers both the heating and the cooling bills. And also, so what happens is when you have a utility like Piesco now, that hits its peak during air conditioning in hot summer days, as we electrify homes, that peak is going to move from the summer to the winter. And when it's 10 degrees below zero outside and everybody's running their heat pump, right, that's going to demand a lot of electricity. Well, guess what? When it's 15 below zero outside, the ground temperature is still 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So if we, as we build new housing developments, if we use geothermal heat pumps, it'll minimize that problem of getting high winter peaks. And then this has also been mentioned by the other speakers, but the idea of a thermal energy network where you can have not only homes, but businesses, data centers, any place where you have waste heat, you can take advantage of that. So these types of networks become very, very efficient. So I thought I'd finish by just talking about my personal experience with a cold climate heat pump. Because look, for those of you watching this webinar, the chances are your personal experience will be with installing a cold climate heat pump in your home. Maybe some of you have done that already. So the installation costs probably about $15,000 to $20,000. And the best time to do that is if you're adding air conditioning or replacing an old air conditioner, and if you're replacing an old furnace. So when I did this, my furnace was about 20 years old. It was due to fail eventually anyway. And so you can take credit for not having to pay for the furnace, not having to pay for the air conditioner. And now Piesco has very, very attractive rebates for cold climate heat pumps. That really cuts down on this cost. In terms of operation, I talked about a little bit about that before. So it's close to the cost of gas if you can take advantage of not using the heat pump at full blast during this 5 to 9 peak period during the weekdays. I'll also point out that when you go all electric in your home and they disconnect the gas, you save about $200 a year just from the hookup charge for the natural gas. And then finally, in terms of performance, the heat pump has kept my house warm in Golden at 15 below zero without the use of my electric resistance backup heater. I've never used it, never needed it. It provides air at a lower temperature than my furnace did. And my furnace provided air at about maybe 120 degrees Fahrenheit. This provides air at 108. But your skin temperature is about 92. So even if you were right by the register, you're not going to feel cool air blowing on you. It's still warm air. It runs at a much lower flow rate than the furnace, but it runs more or less continuously all day, so it's very quiet. The one thing about it is if I go on vacation, because it's running at a low flow rate, it's not like the gas furnace that can come on blasting and heat your house up in, an hour or something. It can take several hours if you're on vacation and you set it way back. So I use the app on my iPhone before I come home from a vacation and heat up the house a few hours before I return. All right, I want to finish by just talking about what the Colorado Clean Heat Plan issue is in a nutshell. Colorado is a national leader in grid decarbonization. Our electric grid from Xcel, from Piesco, Public Service of Colorado, is on track to be 80% solar and wind in just 4 years. That's great. And also in the third quarter of last year, where we have some data, EVs were 1/3 of new car sales in Colorado. That's the best of any of the 50 states. So we're leaders in transitioning the transportation side to electricity. But building electrification is too slow in Colorado. Piesco is both a for-profit electric utility and gas utility. Promotion of all electric buildings undermines their gas business. We're asking people that make money putting in gas pipelines and selling natural gas to homes to go out there and really push new home developers to instead go all electric. Are they really going to do that with passion? I don't think so. And in fact, when you look at the new home developments going into Colorado, at least 35,000 new homes are getting gas infrastructure. And the other speaker pointed out that piping is going to last for many, many decades. And those gas furnaces themselves are going to last for like 20 years. People aren't going to go and replace a gas furnace with a heat pump in 2 years. And so we're committing ourselves to future emissions of carbon dioxide, methane leaks, both of which cause climate change, as well as these air pollution issues that have already been discussed. So Colorado building electrification or clean heat targets are very weak relative to the seriousness of climate change. And not only are those targets weak, but Piesco is not even meeting those low targets. That's what we're facing. We're doing great with grid decarbonization. We're doing great with electrifying cars. We're not doing well with electrifying buildings. So thanks very much for listening. And all of us, I guess, will be happy to answer questions. And I think all the slides will be made available to everyone. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up and talk about how we can all take action if we want to comment to the Public Utilities Commission. So we don't need to burn gas in our homes, as Chuck said. I think he covered those bases very well. So let me switch my slides here. Okay, so how do we stand up for Colorado's health, safety, climate, and consumers? We, the public, can testify at the January 20th PUC public hearing on the Xcel GIP. It's at 5 p.m. I will make sure that the Empower Hour hosts have information to send all of you so that you can testify remotely in this hearing. Our basic message that we're telling the PUC is that Colorado statute requires the gas utilities to reduce emissions by 22% by 2030, and they can't do that while focusing on more investment in pipelines. And your voice for health is needed at the Public Utilities Commission online public hearing, and it's not at, I'm sorry, that is not at 10 a.m. It's at 5 p.m. We'll get you all the information you need. And I just also wanted to say that the Public Utilities Commission legislation, its legislative mandate is up for renewal in the current legislative session starting tomorrow. And you can contact me to learn how to get involved in legislative advocacy for a rigorous Public Utilities Commission with enforcement capabilities, and that promotes equity and reduces fossil fuel investment. Thanks.
I'm going to start with a question here for Tracy from Martin Volker. Does the reauthorization of the PUC currently underway offer opportunities, for example, to ensure tighter enforcement for violations? Tracy?
I am going to push that over to Lauren because I've looked at it in a high level, but Lauren has more information. But there is one thing you can do. You can ask, there's smart hearings going on right now. You can ask your legislator, especially if they're on the Energy and Transportation Senate Committee or the Energy and Environment Committee in the House, to ask the PUC how they're doing on enforcement. So that's one thing you do right away in these next several weeks. But Lauren, why don't you answer you know a lot more about this than I do at this point.
Well, there's definitely an opportunity for us all to weigh in on what we want to see in the PUC sunset bill. That's the term that they're using, sunset, because the prior mandate is expiring and a new one has to start. So we all have a chance. Yes, you are not alone in wanting more rigorous enforcement mandate and capacity. The mandate says they have to enforce. The capacity says they can, they have the right to, and they have the tools to enforce. And those are two different things. I really do think it's important to focus on those penalties because we're in a budget crunch. And so when we make our arguments, that we need more enforcement, there's often an argument that, well, that means more inspectors. That costs a lot of money. We need to enforce so that we get those fines paid, not just for the PUC, but they generally go into the general fund. You can argue that they should go back to the PUC. You can argue whatever works for you. It is a matter of having a groundswell of public advocacy for a better path that serves the public.
Great, thank you. Again from Martin Volker and again to Tracy, HB 22-1362 on building energy codes tighter requires a tighter building envelope. Does that mandate only look at measured outcomes or prescribe with which technologies a tighter building envelope is achieved?
That's a great question. So first of all, the bill itself designated a building energy codes board to figure out all those details. I mean, energy codes can get pretty nasty detailed, but they do follow the International Energy Conservation Code, which to my understanding does require in new buildings or major renovations, things like you need to use a better insulated window or that kind of stuff. But in terms of prescriptive versus performance, what I do know is that there are two pathways when it comes to heat pumps versus gas. So you can look on the Colorado Energy Office, just Google Colorado low carbon and energy codes, and there is a presentation that goes through this. And there are some prescriptive ways to do things. There's some performance ways to do it. as it relates to heat pumps versus gas furnaces. There's also things like demand response and, a couple other things like that. But boy, other than that, you have to really dig into the code. I don't know all the details. So I hope that helps you a little bit, Martin. Great question.
Great, thank you, Tracy. And again, from Martin, three in a row. Whatever happened to energy as a service as a new business model for utilities? Ron Lair and et al. As Chuck and Lauren pointed out, our investor-owned utilities have the wrong incentives.
Well,
So that may be more rhetorical, but if anybody wants to use that as a opportunity to comment, go right ahead.
well,
I'll
to the
start off.
latter,
Go ahead, Lauren, go ahead. You want
the
to add
latter
something?
point, I don't know much about the first point, energy as a service, but there are a number of coalition partners who together and individually are advocating for a change in the profit model so that return on expenditure can be tied to performance. It could be performance based, or it could be based on the type of energy work that's being done. In other words, if it's renewable energy, we could possibly have a higher ROE for Xcel and other utilities. And conversely, they're going to get a lower return if they don't do things that comply with our energy goals. So we can do things like that. It hasn't been formalized, but it's certainly a concept that a lot of us are considering.
Great, very interesting, Lauren. Liz Maris asks, how might municipalities making building requirements changes apply pressure to the PUC? That's an open question. Anybody want to weigh in on that? Go ahead, Tracy.
Okay, this is a recent example. The PUC had to set interim targets between 2030 and 2050 regarding clean heat targets. And the question is, well, do we ramp up slowly? Do we have a straight line? This is a question before them. And I testified at that saying, no, we have to be very aggressive on this. And Xcel was saying, no, we need to ramp up slower and all that. I can't tell you how many municipalities and representatives and county commissioners all testified there, and the PUC did what the communities wanted. So showing up, having your local elected officials show up and testify at these PUC hearings is so important. It's so important.
Yeah, and there's
Great.
one of our partner groups, a member of our coalition is Colorado Communities for Climate Action. There are over 45 municipalities and counties that are part of that coalition, and they advocate collectively and separately. But even if they're not part of it, obviously they can show up and be in part of these conversations at the PUC and with legislators, and they do, but that movement can grow.
Great, thank you, Lauren. And there are a couple questions that have been answered in writing, but I'm going to read them into the recording so that they go along with this video. And R.J. Harrington asked of Chuck, how did you get the monopoly to disconnect your gas meter? And Chuck responded, I was lucky. It just took a couple of months of pestering them. They also removed my meter. Of course, this was 3 years ago. With more people wanting that nowadays, the wait is probably longer. And Chuck, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, yeah, so apparently he's still having issues. So KK DeVivier, who is a law professor at DU, now lives in Boulder. She got very frustrated when she electrified trying to get her gas disconnected. And she even wrote an article, I think it might have been in the Boulder Daily Camera, expressing her frustration with that. I believe she did finally get Xcel to come out and disconnect the gas. And so I had suggested that he may want to contact KK and see how she finally made it happen. But this is clearly an issue.
Great.
unfortunately.
Looks like
I'm
Tracy, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah. I'm a proud owner of a ground source heat pump right now. And we disconnected our gas last year. It was a pretty straightforward process, but the form that Xcel says to use does not say disconnect gas. Are you a new gas customer? Then I just redlined the thing and said, this, I want my gas disconnected because I have an all electric house. And it did go really smooth, but their form doesn't make any sense. You have to redline their stupid form.
And about how long did it take you after you submitted the form?
It probably took the better part of 2 months, a month and a half, 2 months.
Okay, great. And here's another question that was to Chuck, and Chuck had written a response, but I am going to read it into the record here. So Alan says, Chuck, might you have a source for the statement that at least 35,000 new Colorado homes will get gas infrastructure? And I'm going to read, with Chuck's permission, I'm going to read his response to Alan, and then you can add to that if you like, or anyone else can comment. And Chuck says, Alan, from my written give testimony, an early indication of the impact of this voluntary program is given in Hearing Exhibit 101, Attachment JJP-1, Appendix 5, New Business Project Packets. It describes a total of 6 new planned projects costing a total of over $50 million and involving approximately 35,000 new homes, for which over 10 miles of new gas infrastructure is being installed. The 6 projects together will require a total peak new natural gas flow of approximately 5 million cubic feet per hour. So, Chuck, that seems very comprehensive. Do you want to add anything to that? And I invite after that any other panel members who want to weigh in.
No, I mean, it just underscores the fact that, Piesco is saying, well, gee, we talk to these home builders and tell them about how great heat pumps are, but for whatever reason, they just want to keep putting in natural gas. Again, I don't think that the Public Utilities Commission or the public can expect a gas utility to be, very passionate about getting home builders to put in all electric buildings.
Great. Anybody else want to weigh in? Okay, I'll move ahead to KK Duvivier, who has already been mentioned in this conversation. And she says, thanks for the shout out, Chuck. I had to file complaints with the PUC to get action and can help others. So that is KK Duvivier, offering to help if anybody wants to get in contact with her to move it along. Any other comments in that regard on getting your gas meter disconnected? Okay, not seeing any. I'll look for, yes, here's Alan with a question. Alan Best says, what legislation might we see or is needed to keep moving this effort forward? Well, there's a wide open question. Who wants to take that one?
I think that's one for Tracy.
Oh
Go
boy.
ahead, Lauren.
Okay. There's, wave a magic wand. I think we need to change the incentives, change the structure for how utilities get compensated. I mean, why they get compensated by building more stuff. They don't get compensated for maintaining things, but it's really building more stuff. So change the way we compensate. Don't do so much for gas infrastructure, do it more for renewables and clean heat, on clean heat networks. I mean, there's so many networks already in Colorado. We've got, Colorado Mesa University, but there's also 14 thermal energy networks here in Colorado already. And across the nation, there's 28 utility-led thermal networks projects. They're in the pipeline right now, 28 led by utilities and hundreds more third-party things. So we got to change the incentives that these utilities have for doing the right stuff.
And that can be done as part of the PUC sunset bill, potentially. There's other legislation. So we have clean heat targets now of the 22% reduction. Recently, the PUC set a target of 41% reduction by 2035. and I believe 45%, I don't remember all the numbers, but there was a clean heat targets rulemaking that did very well. And now there's a potential for a clean electricity legislation. So towards the end of last year, there was a proposal to solidify our commitment to attaining 100% clean or renewable electric generation, taking that target date of 2050 to 2040. That wasn't introduced, but the concept hasn't gone away. So there could be further efforts to accelerate movement towards clean electricity generation beyond the 2030 target of 80% to meet the overall goal at minimum of 2050, 100% emission-free power generation. But
Here's a thought
not
I've had.
guaranteed that'll happen, but it could.
Here's a thought I've had. People have been trying for years to pass a carbon tax that reflects the social cost of carbon, right? Very hard to get that through Congress. What about if in Colorado we pass a very limited targeted carbon tax just on the use of natural gas in buildings? And all the fees collected from that carbon tax are used to reward those people that get off gas and put in heat pumps. So all that money gets returned to the public that make this change to electrification. Now, you couldn't just come out with this tax all at once. You'd have to sort of ramp it up over years because you don't want to penalize people and have their heating bills suddenly jump higher. But I think that's one way we could do it in a way that financially makes it more attractive to electrify buildings.
Great idea. Interesting. Tracy, you want to have more comment here?
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing that I might have misspoken on. Utilities, they make money, they make profit on building new stuff. In terms of maintenance, they just pass those costs on, but that's not where they make so much money. They make correct me if I'm wrong on this, Lauren, but it's my understanding that they make most of their money, their return on investment that they pass on to their shareholders by building new stuff, not by operations and maintenance. Those costs are just simply, they get compensated, but it's just passed through and they just charge the customers for that.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the formula is, but that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, in watching over the years, the more they spend, the more they make.
Yeah, they're actually incentivized to do the most expensive things. That's why a lot of utilities love to build nuclear power plants. They're ridiculously expensive. But then if they can convince PUC to let them put it into the base rate, they make a lot of money off it. I mean, you look at, for example, in Georgia, Vogtle units 3 and 4 there. I think they raised utility bills, I don't know, something like 20-30%.
But if we incentivize them to make more money by building, doing things that are clean heat networks, as opposed to new gas pipelines, that's where I'm saying maybe we can change the incentive structure.
Right.
Yeah, great idea. Anything further on the topic? So Martin is returning to discussion of getting his meter disconnected and acknowledging both the comments made by RJ and KK. He says, I was ignored at first, called again, was referred to a different office, then was sent a form letter by mail where I had to certify that I was of sane mind. After that, someone came within 6 weeks to remove the meter and cap it off. I'll see if I find that form and its name. So it does, sounds like it's not necessarily as easy as signing up for gas. Getting rid of it's more difficult. And Martin further says, Chuck, are you happy with your induction cook stove? And that went away quickly. I didn't Did you answer that, Chuck,
It,
or?
it just jumped into answer. The answer is I bought a Frigidaire Gallery at Best Buy. It was $1,000, and it's terrific.
There you go,
It
an
makes my
endorsement.
morning oatmeal faster than you can imagine.
Yeah, they're very fast and they're very responsive. I just have a little induction hot plate. You can get a single or a double. They're very, very inexpensive and they're much faster at heating water or other things than unfortunately, I still own a gas stove and it's much faster than that.
And I have an induction cooktop too. And the one thing I caution everybody, you can control the heat so much better than gas. But I caution anybody who's using an induction stove, you do not walk away from the stove. It's so quick, things will boil over before you know it. So you need to pay attention. And the cooking pots and pans, they're really inexpensive. It's just the way to go. It's just a smart thing to do.
And also the cooking surface stays cool. I don't know how many times with previous. I've always had an electric stove, but it was electric resistant stove. I don't know how many times I made the mistake of leaving a plastic lid on the top of the stove and wind up with a melted plastic lid. That ain't going to happen with a induction stove top.
Great. Now we turn the program into a influencers for induction cooking. But RJ Harrington has a question. He's directing this to Chuck. He says CEA made a similar carbon price proposal 10 plus years ago. I'll ask that board/staff to repost that research because it wasn't on the site last looked.
Great, thanks.
Okay, and let's see, we actually may have come to the end. No. Liz Maris asks or says annual rebates are tough when living paycheck to paycheck. So that's a comment.
A
And
carbon tax isn't a perfect answer. There has to be programs that address the impacts on low income people, and that's just how it is. So, if there is going to be a carbon tax, we have to look at, or any action, we have to look at its impact on every group of people, all different regions, different demographics. We have to look at the impact on everyone. We have to take a holistic approach with all policy, whether it's climate policy, energy policy. You cannot ignore major sectors of society when you create policy. So it's a blunt instrument if you do that. And so it's not going to be equitable unless we focus on making it that way.
okay, great, good point, Lauren. And Alan Besk is back saying, some of this has been said before, but let me ask the question in this way. What gives you the most optimism and what causes you the most discouragement in the context of Colorado and this work of decarbonizing our buildings? That is open for anybody who wants to respond.
Well, I can just say with all the craziness, especially at the national level, doing this work, I've really got involved in the PUC proceedings. My voice does make a difference, and everybody's voice makes a difference, and this gives me hope. I mean, I think the horse has left the barn in terms of things like solar installations, what Chuck talked about. The number of EVs that are going on the road. I think we've got some headwinds, but I've also seen where Colorado has led the way in many, many different ways. And other states look to that. Other federal governments and the federal government, not this administration, look to that. So it gives me hope by doing the work at the state and local level and showing these ideas. Every single day, I'm seeing some new projects, both locally and across the country, that give me hope. So I focus on that and what I can do.
Thank you, Tracy. Any
I guess
others?
what makes me optimistic is number one, our grid is rapidly decarbonizing, so the electricity is getting clean very fast. And now we have these cold climate heat pumps that we didn't have too many years ago, and they work great. I'm sitting in a house right now, heated with a cold climate heat pump. Very, very pleased with it. It's I never hear it. It's very quiet. I have also as I showed in one of my slides, I have a hybrid heat pump water heater, which works well. We now have the technology to do this, and we have the clean electricity to power it. It's just a matter of, how do we get it out there faster? We need to do it much faster, and we do have this issue with utility incentives not being in line with the speed we need to make the transition. But the good news is we have the technology and it's cost effective.
Great, thank you, Chuck. Anybody else to add in on that? Okay, we have from KK Duvivier, Citizens Climate Lobby urges carbon tax plus dividend to address the equity issue.
Yeah, this all started with Jim Hansen. I think my first slide I mentioned Jim, and he came up. He called it fee and dividend. And the idea is, yeah, you put a carbon tax out there and you collect that fee and then you distribute back to the people. It's hard to do that politically. As soon as government collects money, government people find ways to use that money. And so it's in practice, it's hard to do. But it's why I said if we put a tax on just natural gas in buildings and return it to people who then electrify their homes, we're essentially doing that. We're essentially using a fee and dividend approach.
Great, good to hear. We have reached the end. We've exhausted all the questions, at least that people are willing to ask. I want to thank all of you for your time and this illuminating conversation. It really did expand on beyond just the simple things of the GIP. And I thank you for your contribution in enlightening us all on that. And unless there's anything further to be said, I'm going to say that we're come to the end of this event. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff, and really appreciate all the presentations. I just want to do the last little bit of announcements, which is to say thank you, Lauren and Patricia, Chuck, and Tracy for sharing all of this information tonight. And I want to thank the other Empower Our Future communication team members who are integral to making these Empower Hours happen. And they are Paul Cullen, Chris Hoffman, Steve Whitaker, and Julie Zonizer.